back to Mexico Relocation Guide. And this is probably one of the most important videos if you are considering moving to Mexico. Today's topic covers, are you eligible to move to Mexico? You'll have chapter markers throughout the video because I know that you want to be able to skip around. Now, before we get started, please let me know in the comments what part of the world you are watching us from. All right, let's get right into the video. The first thing you have to ask yourself before moving to Mexico is, am I eligible for Mexican residency? And to understand this, you have to know that there are various ways by which you can apply for a residency visa in Mexico. These include residency through economic solvency, residency for those with ties to a Mexican citizen or a Mexican resident, and there's even a special program that doesn't require economic solvency. Now, before we get started, please keep in mind that there are links in the comments section to a few of these free resources that I'll mention throughout this video, because this will be a lot of information and sometimes it's easier to consume it in written form. Let's start with residency through economic solvency. 90% of you watching this video from home will apply for a residency visa through economic solvency. Now, as the name states, you need to show proof of either a steady income or savings/investment accounts. In other words, you need to prove to Mexico that you're going to be able to sustain yourself financially while living here. Now, the first step will take place at a Mexican consulate near you. But it's important to know that not all of them process a Mexican residency visa. To know which ones do, we recommend doing a Google search for Mexican, consulate, and the name of your city. When you visit their site, look for a menu option titled Visas, or it might also say Services to Non-Mexicans. Now, every Mexican embassy and consulate has some level of autonomy. So the information I share with you on this video is a baseline, but you have to keep in mind that each Mexican consulate or embassy may have different requirements than what is mentioned on this video. Another important thing to know is that you can apply for residency in Mexico years before you actually plan to move, since currently you aren't required to live in Mexico to remain a resident. If you're going to apply for a Mexican residency visa through economic solvency, there are two different ways that you can get residency. One of them is temporary and the other one is permanent. Now I'm going to start with a temporary residency. You are eligible to apply for temporary residency in Mexico if you can prove you make 300 days of Mexico City's minimum wage a month. And you have to prove that it's either through employment, pensions, or Social Security income. Now, in 2024, Mexico City's minimum wage, it's 249 pesos. In 2024, you would need to make 74,700 pesos a month to qualify for temporary residency. Now, depending on the exchange rate, whether you're coming from Canada, you're coming from the United States, or some other part in Europe, I'm going to make it easier for everyone because 90% of you watching this channel watch us from the United States. So depending on the exchange rate also, that comes out to about $4,038 a month. And most consulates want to see your bank statements for the last 6 months. However, it's important to know that not all consulates use the same minimum wage or the same formulas to calculate economic solvency. And it's also important to note that Mexico City's minimum wage increases every year. So the economic solvency requirements for residency also change every year. My advice before applying is to reach out to the Mexican consulate or embassy that you're going to be applying at and determine their solvency requirements at the time you apply. Because again, these can change. Now, to give you an example of how different consulates have different requirements, in 2024, the Raleigh, North Carolina Mexican consulate requires $3,100 a month in income for the past 6 months. Compare that to the over $4,000 that other consulates require to qualify, and you can see why you may hear some people say, oh, you just need to shop around for a different consulate. There are other consulates like this that also have different requirements than the formula that I just gave you. And because we value your time, we have asked most of the consulates around the United States, Canada, and Europe that our viewers apply at for their economic solvency requirements. To get that information, follow the link in the comments. That way you know what you can expect at the consulate that you plan to apply at in real time. Now, let's say that you don't make $3,000 or $4,000 a month. You can also qualify for temporary residency based on investments or savings. The government formula for savings or investments is that you need to make at least 5,000 days of Mexico City's minimum wage for the past 12 months. But again, different Mexican consulates and embassies have different requirements. So we recommend checking out our table to get a list of the consulates and embassies that have provided that info to us. Again, the link is in the comments. Now, for a list of the most common documents you need to have to apply for residency through economic solvency, check out our free residency guide. The link is in the comments below. Many of you will apply for temporary residency initially, but there is an option to apply for a Mexican permanent residency visa. A lot of people don't qualify for permanent residency because the income requirements are higher, and most consulates also want applicants to be over 60 years of age and retired. Again, this varies from consulate to consulate, so just keep that in mind. But the income requirements tend to actually be higher. Just the age requirement and for you to be retired is something that some consulates can use at their own discretion. Now, the formula for permanent residency states that you must prove you earn at least 500 days of Mexico City's minimum wage, which is around $6,800 a month for the past 6 months in today's exchange rate. The other option is you can apply through savings or investments, in which case you'll have to have 20,000 days of Mexico City's minimum wage in your savings or investments account. Those investments can be things like 401ks, brokerage accounts, your savings account, obviously. And you have to keep in mind that having a home and showing the consulate that it's worth a certain amount is not a valid way to show that you have an investment. They want to be able to see bank statements with minimum balances. My advice before applying is to reach out to the Mexican consulate or embassy you are applying at, and again, determine their solvency requirements at the time you apply. Now, what if you don't qualify for either temporary or permanent residency? Well, there is another option that a lot of people are taking advantage of right now, and that is known as the RNE program, or you may also hear it called the Regularization program. And this program is a game changer because you can obtain residency without having to prove economic solvency. Now, to know if you qualify for this program, the baseline requirements are you must prove you have visited Mexico at least once before 2022. The next time you come to Mexico, you will enter as a tourist, and you will need to wait until your FMM, which is also known as your tourist permit, to expire. That means that if you're given an FMM for 180 days, you must stay in Mexico until that permit expires before you're eligible to apply. If you come to Mexico on a cruise, and that's your only previous entry to the country, that doesn't count you in and you won't be eligible. If you drove to Mexico, but didn't stop at immigration across the border to obtain an FMM, that also doesn't count since they have no record of you coming into the country. Now with this program, you get a 4-year temporary residency visa. The process can take 1 to 4 weeks from the time you apply to when you obtain your residency card. And the current cost for that is around 17,000 pesos, or around $1,000. Some of you have ties to a Mexican national or resident. And one of the biggest benefits of obtaining residency in Mexico this way is that you don't need to prove economic solvency. You see, Mexico is very pro-family. So the process for those who are family or residents or nationals is easier. Another benefit of applying through ties to a Mexican national or resident is that if you are already in Mexico, you don't have to leave Mexico to start that process. But you can also start the process at a Mexican consulate or embassy abroad. Now, depending on your relationship, you may apply for temporary or permanent residency, and in some cases, you can even get citizenship. For example, if your parents were born in Mexico, you qualify to apply for dual citizenship in Mexico through birthright. If you are married to a Mexican national, you can apply for a 2-year temporary residency visa, after which you are eligible to apply for a permanent residency visa without having to prove economic solvency. If you are the spouse of a Mexican resident, you can also apply for residency through them without economic solvency. The parents of a Mexican citizen or resident can also apply for residency. Now, the documentation you'll need to show changes depending on the bond or the relationship, but usually you'll need to show proof of said relationship, such as marriage certificates, birth certificates, and those kinds of documents that shows who you are and in fact are family. If you start the process in Mexico, all foreign documents should be translated and you'll need to have them apostilled or authenticated. We also have the fees associated with each one of these processes, and they also change every year, so keep in mind that immigration fees tend to also increase every year. But don't worry, we like to keep you up to date. You can get a list of the most current immigration fees on our site. Again, the link is in the comments. Now, if you're getting overwhelmed at this point, it's completely normal, and trust me, for all these processes, I highly recommend working with a reputable immigration facilitator in Mexico. Keep in mind that not all immigration facilitators are equal. Some of them are definitely better than others. So if you're interested in learning more about what an immigration facilitator is, how to hire one, and more about that topic, I made a video explaining a little bit more about that. The link is in the comments. Now, one disclaimer that I do want to make is that this video is a very high-level overview of what the residency visa process is like. There's a lot more to it than what I'm giving you here. I just want to give you a very brief overview to help you determine if you qualify to move to Mexico. Now, unfortunately, the government sites don't do a really good job of communicating exactly what to expect or some of the nuances that we mentioned today. So, if you want more details and are ready to move to Mexico, we recommend checking out our complete Mexico relocation guide. We give you a step-by-step guide on the residency visa process and a bunch of other topics that you need to know about before moving to Mexico, such as healthcare, real estate, rentals, driving, bringing your household goods, bringing pets, and even some of the scams that you need to avoid. But because we know that Mexican bureaucracy is hard to navigate on your own, we also include our full directory of vetted contacts, which are all across Mexico. So it doesn't matter if you're moving to Mérida or you're moving to La Paz, or you're going to San Miguel de Allende or Ajijic or Puebla, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and you name it, everything in between. We have contacts all across Mexico. That will make your move a lot easier. And that obviously includes our vetted immigration facilitators across Mexico. Some of those facilitators, by the way, can even help you book your consulate appointment for you, which I know is one of the biggest struggles that a lot of people have. So if you're interested in seeing what other customers have said about the online guide and you want to know what's included, go to mexicorelocationguide.com/guide/. Now, I hope this information has been helpful to you. If it is, do me a favor and give this video a like. At Mexico Relocation Guide, we are dedicated to bring you the most up-to-date information for your move to Mexico. We work with hundreds of professionals across Mexico to ensure that the information we share is not only relevant, but it's actually fact-checked. That way, you have the confidence that the information we give you here is accurate. Determining if you qualify for residency in Mexico isn't the only thing that you need to be asking yourself before moving. There are other topics such as, where will you live? What are your healthcare options? What are some common moving costs? What do you need to budget? And what are some common mistakes that newcomers make? So in the next coming weeks, we're going to release a few more videos covering these topics. Of course, if you'd rather read those, you can find them all on our website at mexicorelocationguide.com/blog. Now, don't forget to check the comments section for the links to all the resources that I mentioned on this video. My name is Mariana, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I will see you guys on our next video. Hasta luego!